I guess the first question to start with is, how did you get involved with Forsaken?
Really, just by through the Facebook group, and I think that's where I first heard of it, in the Booktropia group, and then heard about it through Jesse James.
Yeah.
And I just thought that sounded really perfect for something I was already working on. So contacted Jesse from there, and
and here you are
for a while. And here we are. Yeah. So I was really pleased.
And you mentioned it was something to do with one of your works in progress. Can you tell me a bit about your work to date, and I suppose particularly about the work that you did that's fitting with Forsaken?
Well, I've got a novel that's just come out, which is just coming out of the normal book trope editions, which is a bit more. It's hard to fit into a genre. It's kind of it's got elements of time travel, elements of historical fantasy. So there's a bit of a sci-fi flavor in some ways, sort of a time slip. It goes over 5,000 years, so you're going back to sort of Neolithic period. And that was my first book trope book. And then really, I've always liked short stories. I've always liked that form. And I started thinking about, originally I started doing some little flash fiction pieces, trying to get them like down to 100 words. And I just took as a theme kind of quite a dark theme, quite a sort of, started thinking about what are the things that we really fear, what are our little fears that we have at the back of our minds, what little things that we worry about, when we're alone at night, that kind of thing. And I originally did, like I say, some little flash fiction pieces on those. And then I started thinking these are actually quite good ideas. They would easily stand up to being a longer story. So I took a lot of those and I came up with some new ones, and I made what I ended up calling at the moment a working title as A Dark Assortment, because they're a bit of a mixture. I wouldn't say they're typically your average horror story in many ways. They vary, but they're all quite dark in the tone.
I quite like dark stuff as well. So
yeah.
And one thing I was going to ask, sort of following on from that, then, because you mentioned there's quite a few different genres that even your work, I suppose your work to date has fitted into quite a few different ones. And is that reflected in kind of the stuff that you read as well?
I guess it must be. That's a good question. I've always read very widely, so I'll read. 1 week I might be reading something quite classic. Another time it'd be sci-fi. Another time crime. Another time something dark. I kind of do vary. I like to have quite a varied diet with reading, and I have for a long, long time. I just always like to have something that I'm dipping into, and I'll quite like humorous things as well. So I'll get some funny things that as a standby read in there as well. Just a whole variety. So I guess that kind of comes out in my writing. I hadn't really thought about it that way before, so that's a really good question. Thank you.
It's sort of like a melting pot, isn't it? And
yeah.
One question I ask everybody, and that this kind of feeds into it, is what's the last book that you read, and what did you think of it?
The last sort of major thing I read, I was reading one that just turned out to be a collection of newspaper articles, which it wasn't very satisfying. But before that, I read Slaughterhouse-Five, Kurt Vonnegut, and I just picked it up in a charity shop. Actually, I thought, oh yeah, Kurt Vonnegut. Why have I not reread? I've heard so many people talking about his stuff and about him, and I thought I must read this. I'd heard of Slaughterhouse-Five, but didn't really know even what it was about. So I just found that really absorbing. I did a review of that on my blog as well, because I just I thought it was a really good introduction to his stuff, and I really want to go on now to read some more stuff by Vonnegut, because I just I don't know, it was really a unique book. It was in many ways it was funny, but on the other hand it was dealing with very tragic things. It was talking about the bombing of Dresden in the Second World War, which is obviously a horrendous thing, which he lived through. And that comes across really well. So there's sort of the reality side of it, of horrible things that he actually witnessed firsthand, and then his character is actually quite a hapless guy who's sort of a bit hopeless, and he's quite a comical character. So it was a really intriguing book, really interesting. I really enjoyed it.
Brilliant. I haven't read that, and I'm kind of in the same situation that you were in that, you know, I know that I should read some more of his stuff, and I just haven't got round to it, so I have to check that out.
Yeah, it's quite a quick read as well. It's quite a slim book. In many ways, it's kind of an anti-war book. It sort of has that tone running through it, but really well worth the read. And
it sounds perfect for me.
yeah.
And so you mentioned that you sort of came into Forsaken as through being part of Book Trope before that as well. And I wondered what is it about the Book Trope model that makes you kind of feel attracted to it and makes you want to work with Book Trope?
I've been self-publishing for a while now, but although in some ways it's great to have that independence, that you're in control, the downside that not many people talk about is that you're also on your own. And so it's very hard sometimes to think, should I go this way? Should I go that way? You know, what should I do for my cover design? What should I do about choosing an editor? Things like that. And you really, you know, you are quite at the mercy of the people out there. It's quite hard to know. You look at a website, think, is this editing service any good? Should I trust this person or that person? How much should I pay for it? You know, all these kind of issues. And so to have a platform where you're saying, right, let's collaborate, let's do this together, and we have that royalty split, so people have some skin in the game, so to speak, that seemed like a really good idea, quite a cooperative, collaborative kind of idea. And once I got into it, although it takes a little while to get your head around it, just to figure out how the platform works, and I think with my next piece of work, I'll be a lot more confident in the way that I go through the process, because it is a different process and you do have to get used to it. But just that idea of having collaborators suddenly is a breath of fresh air. It really is. So, you know, you're not just stuck on your own, you have others to work with. So I think it's a really great idea.
Yeah, that's great. And I mean, in terms of your writing, how do you plan to get the word out? How are you hoping to sort of connect with readers and that sort of thing?
Well, I have a newsletter sign up on my website at mikeycampling.com. Just get that in there, where people can sign up and they get some free books and other free downloads, some audio stories, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And that is slowly building up, so that's nice. So I do a certain amount of blogging, and occasionally I have bouts on Twitter. Sometimes I'm on Twitter quite a lot. Sometimes I give it a bit of a break, but it's a balance between kind of keeping in touch with people and then actually getting on with doing your writing, because it's quite easy to get distracted when you're meant to be doing, think, oh, this is getting a bit hard. I'll just go and just check Twitter. I'll just check my email and just check this, that, and the other. And, half an hour later, you think, oh, no, I should
have done some writing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what other sort of authors and designers and whatnot under the Forsaken umbrella are you looking forward to working with?
Well, I'm fairly new to the Forsaken group, so I like being in the group and checking out what people are doing. But I don't know if I've particularly got some people in mind yet that I can think of particularly.
What about in Book Trope in general? Is there anyone in particular you've worked with so far that's sort of been awesome?
Yeah, I mean, I came across, looking through Greg Simonson, the cover designer's work, and his work sort of stood out to me. It just looked like the kind of thing that I would really like, and certainly he very quickly hit the nail on the head. He seemed to get what I was wanting for my Darkening Stone book, and I was just really pleased. It was kind of what I would have done if I'd had that skill. You know what I mean? I thought, well, that is exactly what I wanted. So that was great.
I think sometimes as well with kind of, I suppose, with people in the community, is that sometimes people just kind of get what you as the author are trying to achieve, whether it's an editor or a book manager, or so I think it's good when you can connect with somebody like that and have the same goal in mind. Cool. And I suppose we talked a bit about the kind of some of the books that you like to read, but who's your kind of all-time favorite writer, and is there anything that you've learned from them that you try and apply to your own writing?
Gosh, because I read so widely, that's quite a hard question for me. Just kind of depend. Trying to think if there's somebody that I really, really like. I try and pick tips up whenever I'm reading anything. So sometimes I might be looking at even a children's book or a book that's really for teenagers, and I'm just thinking, this is just a great plot. It's really, it's really rollicking along at a good pace, and I like that. I like things to move on. I get a bit fed up with literary works that are a bit, you get to a page 100 and still nothing's happened, and you think, oh goodness sake, so I kind of try and learn from wherever I go, whatever I'm reading. It might be something I'm just reading a passage, and I'll just sort of stop for a minute and think, hang on, that was really great, and go back and I'll read it again and think, why is that so great, that bit I've just read, and I'll look at it and think, oh, I really kind of see what he did there.
Yeah, great. And what's next for you in terms of your writing? What are you going to be working on over the next 12 months?
Well, the thing that I'm in the middle of now is the next Darkening Stone book, because there's a novel that's just come out. There's a novella which is out, which is free on Amazon, called Breaking Ground, which is a kind of bonus story, an add-on story that can be read before or after the other novel. And I'm now writing a sequel to that, to the main novel. So it's the second one. I don't know if there'll be another one after that in that series, because they are pretty hard to write. I give myself quite a hard task, because each book has like 3 or 4 plot lines taking part over history, and they collide in various ways. And it takes quite a lot of, it is actually quite hard to make it all fit together. But that sequel, yeah, I'm about 2/3 of the way through the rewrite on that, and then I'll probably bring that into book trope and start getting editors and things on board for that. And in the background, I have got some words down on a sort of dystopian, futuristic kind of sci-fi, a post-apocalyptic type thing that I want to get that finished as well. That's still in the first draft stage. That's not even finished yet. So that's for later on.
Cool. Actually, one thing you mentioned, obviously, with your sort of book, like, spanning so much time, do you have to do quite a lot of research to make sure that it's all accurate? And if so, how do you go about doing that?
Some is the answer. I don't particularly like it when people wear their research on their sleeves. So you're reading a book with a historical element, and people start telling you like what material everything's made out of and stuff, and you think, I don't really care, really. I don't suppose the person at the time cared about those details. But yeah, I'm kind of interested in all sorts of things anyway. So I've done things like go to visit museums and home in on the flint knives and things like that. I've got some books as well that I use. Google is, of course, brilliant for all this stuff. I try not to get too sucked into it and spend hours looking at pictures of flint knives and things. One slightly sneaky advantage of going that far back is that it's a pre-literary society, so there aren't written records. So you do have to kind of imagine what things would be like, and there's a certain amount. Nobody can say I'm wrong, Yeah. if I say, yeah, they could have done that,
Sounds like you do kind of just enough so that you've got the kind of the basics covered, and then you can you're not trying to too rigidly fit into it, if you know what I mean. Yeah.
I think especially when you're going that far back, I did something that hit into the Second World War in the novella, and I was more conscious of that I really had to make that right. So I did spend quite a bit of time just Googling things, and luckily there are lots of historical sites dealing with that. So I was looking up ranks in the RAF and checking all that out, checking the type of plane, and I had to think, like, where were they sitting in the plane, and how would they have communicated to each other and so on. So I did try and make that accurate, because I thought, well, that is kind of in living memory for lots of people still. So that kind of thing you have to be more careful with, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes, really, yeah.
And just to end on, where can people go to find out more about your work?
Well, my website is fairly easy to find. It's mikeycampling.com, all one word. And I tend to use my full name for most things. So on Twitter, I'm at Mikey Campling. And I'm fairly easy to find on Facebook. There's a Facebook page there. I mean, the website's a definitive thing, because all the links are there to all my other social media from there, and people can sign up on my newsletter there. And if they fancy a taste of those books as well, they can get some free books and lots of other goodies that I hand out to people, which people seem to quite enjoy. And a few people have been good enough to email me and say, thanks for the free books, which is always nice. But that's probably the best way. And all the other forms are on there. People can there's a contact form, so people can shoot me a message that way if they want to. And I always reply to things. So if people comment on my blog, I always reply. And on Twitter, I always, respond to mentions and things. So it's worth doing if people want to get hold of me. And there's a YouTube channel as well. So everything is there. There's one way or another of finding me.